What's going on, Jets fans? It's your boy DT back with another video where we continue to look at potential coordinator hires for this New York Jets team entering 2026, year two of the Aaron Glenn tenure. So yesterday we talked about the defensive side of the ball. Wink Martindale is looking like the favorite for defensive coordinator out of all of the second round of interviews that they've conducted, right? Charles Harris, the DB's coach and interim DC for the Jets. Durante Jones, the D-backs coach and pass game coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, as well as Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines, formerly of the New York Giants. So it looks pretty much like Wink Martindale could be the hire on the defensive side of the ball for the Jets, a hire that I quite frankly am not a fan of, just being completely transparent. There may be some things to like about a Wink Martindale led defense, right? He can make a little bit of mediocre talent into slightly better talent in some cases, right? The 2022 Giants that made the playoffs. But all in all, it's an uninspiring hire, one that makes me think I would rather just have Aaron Glenn and the combination of a first-time higher variance defensive coordinator collaborating on the defensive structure instead of saying, hey, Wink, let's go. You have the keys to the defense. We're going to accommodate you personnel-wise, scheme-wise, and do the things how you want to do it. I would just prefer AG go down with the ship if this is the route that they are ultimately going to take. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, there is going to be a bit of shuffling of the cards in the offensive coaching staff. And the first name that comes to mind as being reported first by Aaron Wilson, now being re-reported by a lot of the Jets beat, is Tanner Engstrand. And Connor Hughes of SNY tweeted yesterday, from my understanding, nothing has been finalized with Tanner Engstrand's role for the 2026 season per sources. Sources close to the Jets OC told SNY that he has expressed in recent days that he doesn't anticipate calling plays this coming season. We'll see what ends up happening. This was Engstrand's first season as a play caller. The Jets offense ranked 29th in yards per game and points per game. The Jets have not announced any offensive coordinator interviews. They are closing in on hiring a new DC. Theoretically, they could hire a veteran offensive consultant and have him call plays. And then the first name that Connor reported on being linked to the Jets is basically Wink Martindale of the offense. Frank Reich, among the names I've heard linked to the Jets as they search for a veteran play caller to add to the coaching staff, Frank Reich, who is currently the senior advisor for the Stanford Cardinals. He was formerly the Colts head coach. He was also a head coach for the Carolina Panthers and got fired in season for that. Tons of offensive coordinator and quarterback coaching experience throughout his time at both college and the pro ranks, dating all the way back to 2009 when he was the quarterback coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Frank Reich was also the Jets quarterback in 1996, and he started 7 games in what amounted to a 1-15 season. Aaron Glenn was also on that roster. So you can see the clear intersection and crossover of those two coaches. Again, a very uninspiring hire, right? This would be like Wink Martindale of the offense. Wink is 62 years old and Frank Reich is 64 years old. The average combined age of these two coordinator hires is 126. That does not work in 2026. You need to go with more modern philosophies. Now, for those who don't want the Jets to have a lot of success in 2026 and they want to look towards 2027 when they rip everything down to the studs and start completely over with new head coaches, new quarterbacks, this is probably the lane that you guys want to shop in. But for me, who's not trying to just completely punt on 2026, neither of these hires brings a ton of confidence, gives me the warm and fuzzies about Aaron Glenn being able to turn this ship around faster and improve this Jets team after a 3-14 start to his career. So ultimately, if Frank Reich is the offensive hire to come in and call plays and Tanner Engstrand is technically demoted, there is going to be a longer process than simply just interviewing Frank Reich, getting him in the building and hiring him, right? So Connor explains this If the Jets were to hire a, quote, new offensive coordinator, they need to go through the Rooney Rule requirements. That would be 2 minority candidates being virtually or in person interviewed by the Jets before they can make their official hire. That's for offensive coordinator, head coach, defensive coordinator, and GM, right? But head coach and GM, they need to be in person specifically. Coordinators, they can be virtual, but you need at least 2. So he says, this isn't something where the Jets could just hire someone for that role. Consultants who call plays is a different story. So do the Jets try to get cute, keep Tanner Engstrand in the offensive coordinator post by name only, strip the play calling duties, hand them over to a Frank Reich, and then he's the one calling plays, even though he's an offensive consultant? This very much feels like 2024 when the Jets were trying to hire a babysitter for Nate Hackett on the offensive side of the ball. And it didn't work for the Jets. They weren't able to attract anybody who wanted the job. I believe Arthur Smith was one of the interviews for that role. Just incredible how all of a sudden we need babysitters on this coaching staff. And that is not necessarily an indictment on Aaron Glenn. It's certainly not a good rapport back to Aaron Glenn, right? If this is the outcome of a 3-14 season, but this very much to me smells like Woody Johnson is so antsy to just shuffle the cards, shuffle the chairs on the Titanic and make changes now that he's forcing, potentially Aaron Glenn now to hire more people, just like he did with Robert Saleh, right? He forced Saleh to fire Mike LaFleur, his offensive coordinator, after 2 seasons. He tried to get a babysitter in here for Nate Hackett. So this very much smells like the same process repeating. Ultimately, if you're going to do all this, you should have just changed the head coach. I'm not going to pretend like the Jets are smart for bringing back Aaron Glenn, but I'm also not going to sit here and say every day until the day he is no longer the head coach that they should have fired him, right? We're just going to move on, react with the news as it comes down. And the newest news is Wink Martindale and Frank Reich, average age of 63 years old, being the new coordinators for this team. I just don't see it working out for the Jets. Go get a first-time defensive coordinator like a Durante Jones, an Ephraim Banda, hell, even a Jim O'Neill from the Detroit Lions. I would rather that than a Wink Martindale because it's just very outdated, right? Wink Martindale is very much the Steve Wilkes of Greg Williams, in my opinion, right? And if you're looking at Frank Reich from that same lens, he's like the Kevin Patullo of Josh McCown's. It just doesn't make sense. What we're doing here as a franchise normally doesn't make sense. So this is very on par for the Jets in terms of their offseason conducting of business. Regardless, if Frank Reich is the only guy that they're eyeing for this job, you might as well have just shut the whole thing down and started fresh in 2026. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like these guys are going to be here in 2027. I really don't think that's the case. And these hires certainly will expedite the process of Woody starting to meddle with this franchise once again. He was very hands-off in 2025. He allowed, AG to make the imprint on the roster as he saw fit, right? They traded away Quinn Williams, Sauce Gardner. They recouped a ton of 2026 and 2027 draft assets. That doesn't mean that AG gets to make those 2027 picks, in my opinion, or Darren Muji, quite frankly. Those guys should be attached at the hip come hell or high water. If they improve together. If they don't improve, they both should get fired together, in my opinion. 2027 should never be, guaranteed or locked in for this regime by any stretch. I am not of that mindset. I'm strictly here saying these hires will clearly not give fans inspiring confidence going forward, and you just can't make these moves. Wink has been, schemed against, right? The USC game versus Michigan. The 2023 Giants season did not end well for Wink, despite making it to the playoffs on the back of the defense in 2022. And conversely, Frank Reich, when he was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers in 2023, they fired him after like 7 or 8 games, maybe 9 games. And he had to go all the way back to being the interim coach at Stanford a season and a half later. So these resumes may have been great hires in, let's say, 2009, 2010, when the Jets were coming off the backs of AFC championship games back to back. Wink Martindale would have been a great hire when he was the linebackers coach and then DC of the Baltimore Ravens. And Frank Reich, who was the quarterbacks coach of the Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning, then those would have been inspiring hires, right? 10, 15 years later down the road, these hires do not inspire a ton of confidence. Now, is there a small percent chance that they could work out and get the offense and defense to play at a, middling of the pack level, right? A 16th overall offense and defense? Perhaps, but so much will have to go right in this process. And now you are potentially tailoring schemes and personnel and potential draft picks attached to these coordinator hires, right? And I'm not going to say if you hire Wink Martindale and you draft Arvell Reese at number 2, that it's going to blow up in your face. No, Arvell Reese can be a great player even if you have a second DC come in for his year 2. But why are we just delaying the inevitable, in my opinion, right? I feel like it's just going to do nothing but cause more, I don't want to say hatred towards AG, but just, I guess, like more conviction from the fan base that these guys are not the right ones for the job. And we don't have to rewrite history, and we don't have to go all the way back to before they hired AG and state on the record, I didn't want AG back. I didn't want X and Y head coach. I wanted this head coach instead. That's all fine. What we are dealing with now is a head coach who is probably in the last year of his, stint with the Jets, trying to do everything he can to save his job, and the hires are just not going to do it, in my opinion. So, unfortunately, that's where we are at with the current state of the Jets. Not really a place you want to be in this situation coming out of a 3-win season, but you're also not going to get the most attractive names, right? The Jim Leonards of the world are not necessarily going to, be knocking down the door at One Jets Drive to get that defensive coordinator post. Now, there is the possibility that Jim Leonard still becomes the DC. There's a very small chance of this, right? The Packers today hired Jonathan Gannon, former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, to be their defensive coordinator, and they were very much in the mix for a Jim Leonard. So, not saying the Jets are the favorite to land Leonard or he's the favorite for the job, but the fact that more vacancies are filling up and the Jets are sitting there looking like, hey, we can wait it out for a Jim Leonard, right? Regardless of what the result is of the Broncos-Patriots game today, hopefully the Broncos win. The Jets are able to interview Jim Leonard tomorrow, Monday, the 26th of January. So I say all this to say, unfortunately, these hirings are not going to inspire a ton of confidence. They could do a lot better, even with guys that don't bring the sticker shock name value to them like a Wink Martindale or a Frank Reich. But unfortunately, this is just the state of the affairs with the New York Jets. I'm going to keep this video a little bit shorter today. We have weather obviously happening all across the country. They're supposedly shutting off my internet sometime this afternoon due to the heavy snow and ice. So going to cut this one a little bit short, but I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like the video, subscribe if you are new, drop your comments below. Wink Martindale, Frank Reich, what do we think of these guys as hires? Sound off in the comments. I certainly appreciate it. And until next time, let's go Jets.